I'd like to welcome everybody to today's presentation on developing healthy relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. Today, we're going to have a pretty straightforward presentation. We're going to define 16 relationship skills, learn about boundaries, signs of violations, and how to maintain boundaries, and summarize the characteristics of healthy relationships. Let's start out with just an overview. We're going to go into each one of these in depth, but an overview of the skills we're talking about today. Awareness of self and other. Authenticity and honesty with self and other. And as I go through this list, think about why these are important in healthy relationships, but how on either extreme they can be dysfunctional, like hyper-awareness of self and other or complete lack of awareness. Anyhow, so awareness, authenticity, and honesty, acceptance of differing opinions, reactions, and perceptions, attention, boundaries, setting them, maintaining them, and respecting them, consistency, communication, compassion, compromise, encouragement, forgiveness, intimacy, responsibility, responsiveness, and unconditional positive regard. Let's start out with awareness of self and other. If we aren't mindful, if we aren't aware of our thoughts, feelings, and needs, then it's going to be hard to communicate them to other people. It's going to be hard to understand why we're reacting or acting the way we are. It's going to be difficult to recognize potentially our influence on others. So we want to look at how aware are we of our thoughts, feelings, and needs in the moment, and how aware are we of others' impact on us. There are people that I've encountered in my life that have reminded me of other people that I've encountered in my life. And initially, I just had this gut reaction. I was like, not really fond. And then I started to realize, I'm like, why? I don't even know this person. And then I started recognizing that something about the way they looked or their demeanor or what they said reminded me of somebody in my past. And I was able, with that awareness, with that self-awareness of how that person was impacting me, I was aware to address my reactions in the moment, recognizing that this was a different person. It's also important to have self-awareness because in order to be supported, in order to feel connected, and in order to feel understood, we need to be able to communicate those thoughts, feelings, wants, needs, etc. And if we don't know them, we can't communicate them. This is a first step for a lot of our clients to start developing self-awareness, turning off that autopilot and asking themselves, how do I really feel? What do I actually need right now? Other awareness is awareness of others' thoughts, feelings, and needs to an extent. And remember on the last slide, I said under or over use or whatever of this skill can be problematic. We don't want to become hyper aware of other people's thoughts, feelings, and needs, where we're always up in their business, where we're trying to guess what they need, where we are controlled in some ways by what's going on with them. That's not a healthy boundary. That's intrusive. But we do need to be aware. If your friend comes in and they're looking down, saying something like, "Hey, Sally, it looks like you're having a bad day today. What's going on?" I'm aware that this person is presenting non-verbally, verbally, whatever, that they seem to be experiencing distress. So I'm going to ask about it. That is a healthy relationship skill. Sally may say, no, I'm not having a bad day. I'm just exhausted. I was up all night with the baby. Okay, fine. No big deal. But at least I cared enough to ask. Or maybe Sally comes in and she's just bouncing off the walls, giddy, happy, over the moon. Again, As a friend in a good relationship, I'm going to say, hey, Sally, goodness, you're excited today. What's going on? Share. I want a little bit of that happiness. But if I'm not aware, if I'm in my own head, in my own thoughts, in my own stuff constantly, I can't connect with Sally. I can't share her good moments as well as her bad moments. And in a relationship, we're sharing. We're not taking it on, but we are being willing to be there. Other awareness also means being aware of how we may impact others. Remember, I said earlier, other people impact us based on who they are, but also potentially who they remind us of. And if I'm interacting with somebody and I just seem to rub them the wrong way, no matter what I do, I have to step back and think to myself, is it me? Or am I reminding them of somebody else? Is my presence, is there something about me triggering trauma memories for them, triggering distress? And going along with, is it me? I'm a morning person. And when I go to work, first thing when I get there, I am at my highest energy. I'm in my best mood. And a lot of people I work with are not morning people. If I go in and I'm bouncing off the walls and I'm asking them 16 different questions because I am wide open, it is completely overwhelming to them first thing in the morning. Being aware of how I impact others. When I'm in a bad mood, how do I impact others? Especially thinking about your children. Children are very sensitive to how people are reacting. And so when you're in a bad mood, how does that impact your kid? And asking, not mind reading. Being aware of others' thoughts, feelings, and needs is great. Being aware of how we might be impacting others, but it's important to check out our assumptions. We want to ask, not mind read, and say, Sally, you're in a bad mood. I don't know that. It looks like you're in a bad mood, or it looks like you're really excited about something, or it seems like I rub you the wrong way. Tell me about what might be going on. And that can be really important. I had somebody in one of my Q&As the other day indicate that they felt like their therapist wanted to fire them because they had differing opinions about something. And my response was, you probably need to ask your therapist, what's going on? I sense that you're feeling like there's not a connection, or you're feeling like you want to fire me as a patient. Is that accurate? Because obviously I've never met either one of them, so I don't know how to answer that. But it's important that we check out our assumptions or what we think may be going on by asking. We can't know what other people are thinking. And a lot of people that were raised in chaotic, dysfunctional households were taught to be hypervigilant to what other people need and not to pay any attention to what they need. Asking people, how often are you self-aware versus on autopilot? How often do you really know what you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you're needing? How often does self-awareness impact your relationships or lack thereof? If I'm not self-aware, I'm cranky, I'm irritable, whatever, and I'm not aware of that, I'm just kind of putting one foot in front of the other, how does that impact my relationships? Likewise, if I'm being self-aware and I say, you know what? I didn't sleep well, I'm in a really bad mood today, so I'm more irritable than usual. If I start out like that, then I'm being self-aware and I'm telling other people, it's not you, it's me. How does other awareness impact your relationship? Or again, being overly concerned with what's going on with others? And what can you do to improve your level of self and other awareness? These are questions you can ask people in individual, in group. You can have them ponder them between sessions, encouraging them to start thinking about what they're doing and how aware they are. Authenticity and honesty with self and other is another big relationship skill. If we are trying to be a chameleon, we're not living authentically. If we're trying to please other people and do whatever they want, we may not be living authentically. If we're not being honest about our needs, other people can't meet them. Honesty means being truthful with yourself and others about the important stuff. If my friend comes in the room and she's wearing a new outfit and I'm like, oh, yeah, not thinking that that's working for you. Do I need to say that? Do I need to say something hurtful? She loves her new outfit. I may not like it. That's my opinion. Does it really matter? And why do I bring that up? Because when I'm talking about honesty, I am not talking about brutal 100% unnecessary honesty. I'm talking about honesty about the important stuff. And we have two different types of lies. We have lies of commission, which is I tell you a lie. She asks me what I think about her outfit, and I say, oh my gosh, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Well, that is inauthentic. And that is dishonest. And I'll tell you, my mother used to do that a lot. I would ask her something and she would tell me what she thought I wanted to hear. And then 2, 3, 4 months, years later, she'd say, oh, I'm so glad you quit doing that. That was awful. I'm like, but you back then you said it. Yeah, so how can I trust anything you say? So lies of commission are overt lies. Lies of omission are when you keep your mouth shut about something. And there are times that we don't need to say something. It's not important. And I go back to the mnemonic that we've used before. Think, is it truthful? Is it helpful? Is it inspirational? Is it necessary? And is there a way to say it in a kind way? And if not, I might not need to say it. But focusing on that necessary aspect. Authenticity, on the other hand, means, or same hand, I guess, means behaving in ways that are congruent with your truth most of the time. I'm being authentic. I love Italian food. I don't like some other type of food. I love all types of food. So we're just going to pretend here. But my friend wants to go to that other type of food restaurant. Am I going to dig my heels in the ground and into the dirt and say, no, we're not going? I don't like that type of food. Probably not. I may say it's not my preference, but I'm sure I can find something there that I like because that's true. So authenticity means being true to myself. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, I love that too. I'm going to say, oh, not my favorite, but I'm going to compromise. And that's another mistake a lot of people make with authenticity. They think if I am going to live my truth, I have to live it 100% of the time and there's no wiggle room. No, that's not true. You have the ability to compromise. Asking people, what is one thing you've been truthful with yourself about today? That goes back to that self-awareness too. What have I been truthful about? What have I been truthful with others about today? This morning I got up, I was stressed, stuff. And I noticed that I was stress eating. I was truthful with myself about that. I stopped and I'm like, you're not really hungry. You're just eating out of stress. And I was honest about what I was doing, which goes along with awareness, but I'm also, having that dialogue. What is one thing you are truthful with others about today? What have you shared with others so they could help support you, so they could feel connected to you? How do you choose which truths to omit? And that goes back to truthful, helpful, inspirational, necessary, and kind. What is one way you have acted authentically today? How have you behaved in line with your truth? Have you shown that you are happy, even to other people? Do you feel differently in relationships in which you are honest and authentic? And I encourage them to think of a relationship that they're not and a relationship that they are. And how do they feel differently? How do they feel safer? How do they feel less exhausted? And in relationships, what keeps you from being honest and authentic, either with yourself or with others? And remember, in those chaotic households, people were often taught that your thoughts and feelings don't matter. So why be honest and authentic with yourself? Because that's not going to happen. And you can't be honest and authentic necessarily with other people because it could trigger their anger. It could trigger rejection. There are a lot of things in our past that may have taught people not to be honest and authentic. And encouraging them to look at that and evaluate whether those conditions still exist today. Acceptance of differing opinions, reactions, and perceptions. Everyone's perceptions are influenced by their past experiences and their current expectations. Our hippocampus keeps track of everything that happens. And whenever we're in a situation that's similar to something we've been in the past, our hippocampus says, hey, we've been here before, or something similar. Here's what to expect. Our expectations are not necessarily accurate, but it's the best we can do based on the information that we have right then. At that point, we have to compare it to the facts in this context at this time, or FitCat. Each person's reactions and opinions are also shaped by their current perceptions and expectations. If I perceive something to be threatening, to be dangerous, to be chaotic, then my reactions are going to be one of threat. Roller coasters. Perfect example. I'm terrified of them. My perception of roller coasters is that they are gloriously unsafe. Therefore, my reaction to getting on a roller coaster is one of pure terror. My cousin, completely opposite. So perceptions shape our reactions. And instead of invalidating somebody's perceptions and reactions, it's important that we understand. I see that this terrifies you. Tell me what it is about roller coasters that terrify you. Encouraging people to reflect on how open they are to understanding other people's perceptions, other people's point of view. Instead of saying, you're wrong, saying, tell me more about that. I'm not understanding why you see this way. I'm not being critical. I'm just not understanding. Some people may not be open to understanding other people's perceptions because they feel, not know, but feel that differing opinions represent threat or rejection. Describe a time when you had a differing perception of or reaction to an event than somebody else. How did each person's past, influence their current reality? Dogs. Some people love them, some people hate them. People who don't like them, that was shaped by their past experiences, their past learning, and it impacts their current reality. When thinking about agreeing to disagree, how do you feel and why? And some people have been in relationships in which somebody very passively, aggressively says, fine, we'll agree to disagree. They didn't really mean it. They were still angry. But so when you hear that phrase, it may trigger something inside of you that is not helpful. However, when you look at it objectively, how can agreeing to disagree actually help people feel accepted, help them feel safer? In terms of attention, positive, proactive attention is essential to nurture connections and communicate to other people that they're cared about, and it improves self-esteem. Encourage people to look at, in their relationships, what types of shared activities do you do? And sharing activities for people, going for coffee, going rock climbing, going to the gym together, whatever it is, tells that other person, hey, you're worthwhile. I enjoy spending time with you. And it builds connection. Additionally, speaking in their love languages can help communicate to them on a different level that you care. And that goes kind of with awareness too. Thinking about people that they know, people that are important to them. What are those people's love languages? Quality time, acts of service, words of affirmation, gifts, or touch. And we all tend to have a couple of different love languages, but often there's one that's prominent. My best friend's love language is gifts. My love language is quality time. So we don't have the same main love language. And when we're trying to communicate to each other that we care about each other, we approach it differently. So questions, think about 3 people that are important to you. How can you give each of those relationships the attention it needs, including yourself? And what are those people's love languages? Again, including your own. How can others give you I mistyped that. How can others give you attention in a way that strengthens your relationship? What types of shared activities would you want to do together? What is your love language? And how can they communicate using your love language? It's important to share those things with people. Boundaries are your house. Boundaries help people live authentically, respecting their feelings, wants, and needs. Boundaries, my house, my walls, keep me safe. My physical boundaries are how close I let somebody get to me physically, eye contact, those sorts of things. Interpersonal boundaries are how quickly we move in relationships, what we share, how intimate we become, emotionally, physically, etc. Emotional boundaries and cognitive boundaries are my thoughts and feelings. These are my thoughts and feelings. I'm not going to necessarily share them with everybody. I don't share them with the UPS guy. I don't necessarily even share them with my neighbor. I will share them with my best friend. And environmental boundaries, that's our stuff. Who are you going to let into your house unsupervised? Who are you going to let borrow your stuff? Who are you going to let read something that you wrote? To develop effective boundaries, people need to be clear with others about who they are, what they want, their beliefs and values, and their limits. One of the phrases we use a lot in therapy is don't let unhealthy people live in your head rent-free. Don't let them violate your boundaries. For each type of boundary, have your clients think of one person who they trust, who they have low boundaries with, and one person that they really don't trust yet, they have high boundaries. And notice I said yet, because when we first meet somebody, we don't automatically trust them. We're not automatically going to share our deepest, darkest secrets. It's a process. So thinking about those 2 different relationships. For each type of boundary, think of what someone could do to get you to either lower or raise that wall. So thinking of a relationship that I'm in with my neighbor, for example, what could they do to get me to raise, feel more guarded, or lower, feel more comfortable with sharing my life, myself, my thoughts, my everything with them? What could they do? And again, boundaries are different. I may have lower environmental boundaries with my neighbor. I'll let them come over, I give them a key so they can water the plants when I'm out of town, whatever. But I may not share my deepest, darkest secrets or some strongly held personal beliefs. Maybe I've got a higher boundary there. So low boundaries doesn't mean low boundaries across the board. It means differing, if you will. Encourage people to think about which boundaries they have the hardest time maintaining and why. Generally, that comes from their past. They learned it was unsafe or futile to try to maintain certain types of boundaries. And what is the difference between maintaining boundaries and compromise? I have a thought about something. I have a feeling about something. Where do I compromise? I hold my boundary. This is my thought, my feeling. Am I allowed to change it? Well, that's yes. We are allowed to change or compromise if we feel that it's necessary and it's helpful. But when we're maintaining our boundaries, it's a conscious choice, and we're recognizing that, yes, this is something I want to do, and I don't feel like I'm being forced to do it. Consistency. When people's beliefs and behaviors, including their reactions, are consistent, it's easier for others to trust them and to know what to expect. Makes sense. If we are consistent, somebody shows up in my office today and I present one way, and they show up in my office next week and I present very similarly, then they know that, okay, this is how Doc Snipes is. If they show up today and I'm all warm and fuzzy and supportive, and they show up next week and I'm the opposite, it's going to feel very chaotic. It's going to feel very unsafe. They don't know when they're going to be able to trust and when they're going to have to be on their guard. Encouraging people to think about, what does consistency look like in your relationship with yourself? When are you consistently aware and responsive to your own needs? What about with others? How does consistency build trust? How does stress and lack of self-awareness impact your consistency? And this is a big one. When we're stressed, remember, our stress response kicks off. Our thinking mind, our prefrontal cortex, kind of goes offline. So then we start acting out of emotion and less out of thinking. It's hard to be consistent when we are feeling threatened. What can we do about that? Developing effective downregulation skills can be helpful. And think of one person in your life who is consistent and one who's erratic. How does that influence your relationships with them? I mean, really ground yourself in thinking about actual relationships. How is one relationship, how does it feel safer and less exhausting than the other? Defensiveness is something that comes up in communication. When people try to communicate and they feel threatened, they often become defensive. We need to help people learn how to listen without defensiveness, but that requires them to be aware of their thoughts and perceptions about a topic. See how all these things build on each other? And then they need strategies to downregulate so they can hear to understand. If somebody brings up a topic I feel passionately about and it triggers a reaction in me, okay, we'll say it's a stressful reaction in me. Being aware of my thoughts and perceptions about it and say, okay, that's not what I think or feel. And then being able to downregulate and get into my wise mind instead of staying in that threat and feeling like this person is now a threat because they disagree with me. That's really important. Once we're able to downregulate, we don't have to agree with what they say, but we can't hear and understand effectively if our stress response is, in the stratosphere. Questions we can ask people. In what way do other people's differing opinions trigger your fears of rejection or danger? What does having differing opinions and perceptions mean to you? What experiences have you had with others when you've had differing perceptions or opinions? Have you been criticized? Have you been judged? Have you been abandoned? Have you been accepted? So what is your prior experience, and what does it mean if somebody has a different opinion? Does it mean they're a bad person? Does it mean just that? They have a different opinion. How does defensiveness impact your relationships and your ability to connect with people? I think most of us have certain hot button topics that trigger defensiveness, and recognizing that that is a normal defense mechanism to become defensive. However, if we leave it unchecked, it tends to have unfortunate impacts on our relationships. So thinking about your defensiveness, or having your client think about their defensiveness, how does it impact relationships and ability to connect with people? If I feel defensive around most people most of the time, I'm not going to want to connect with most anybody. Communication styles can be passive aggressive, or assertive. Now, obviously, we're striving for assertiveness. Passiveness means my boundaries are getting trampled all over. Aggressive means I'm trampling all over somebody else's boundaries. Passive aggressive means I'm kind of making people think that they are trampling all over my boundaries to their face, but then I am getting even behind their back. Not helpful. So assertiveness is the ability to communicate your perceptions, thoughts, and needs in a way that does not violate the boundaries of yourself or another person. I've always used the metaphor of just putting my cards on the table. This is what I think. Take what's useful, leave the rest. Assertiveness requires people to be in their thinking mind. When that defensiveness is triggered, they need to be able to downregulate so they can hear what's being said and process it, and they can communicate from a place of safety instead of communicating from a place of feeling threatened. Communication styles often differ between people and settings, and being aware of how your communication styles differ. For each type of communication style, ask people to give examples of how they've used it, because we've all been passive aggressive, and assertive in different situations and settings. I've never met to date anyone who is 100% assertive 100% of the time. So think about times when you've used each type of communication. How did that style of communication impact your relationship with yourself and others? And in that situation where you were passive aggressive or passive aggressive, how could you have been more assertive instead? So that's a long question there. Thinking about, for each style of communication, how someone else has used it with you and how it impacted your relationship. If you're in a relationship with somebody who communicates aggressively with you most of the time, how does that impact your ability to connect? What is the hardest thing about being assertive instead of passive or aggressive? And what is one thing you can do to start being more assertive? And for a lot of people, that means starting with developing more effective downregulation skills. Compassion. Many people grew up not experiencing compassion from others and being told that self-compassion was weakness. So telling people to be compassionate with themselves, that falls on deaf ears. They're like, I don't know how, and even if I did, I'd feel guilty for it. Compassion means noticing someone's distress and trying to help them to the extent possible without causing harm to self. It's not codependency. It's seeing somebody suffering and recognizing, sort of feeling with them that suffering and having a desire to help. In many ways, compassion is the opposite of judgment. And you can have a whole discussion about that statement. Questions to ask people about compassion. Who has shown you compassion? And when they did, what did that look like? What does compassion even look like to show it, to feel it? Are you able to have compassion for yourself? Yes or no, and why? And for others, again, yes or no. If you're not, what holds you back from feeling compassion or being willing to feel compassion? What are the benefits and drawbacks to compassion? And how can you maximize the benefits and minimize the drawbacks to compassion? Compassion is exhausting. So we need to find that happy medium. We need to minimize how exhausting it is and maximize how effective it is, I guess, if you will. But you can talk about what compassion means to people and what it looks like and what it would look like to be self-compassionate. Compromise may mean taking turns, like you choose what we do this time and I'll choose next time, or meeting somewhere in the middle. I don't want to go all the way across the country for vacation, but we can go halfway across the country. I should have thought of that metaphor better. But compromising with people on what you're going to do. I don't want to go out tonight and party all night long. However, I will meet you for dinner. Okay, so I'm going, but I'm setting limits. Compromise involves accepting something in the middle. It doesn't violate people's boundaries, but it may not be 100% of what either person wanted. I wanted to go home, get in my jammies, do a Netflix marathon, whatever. My friend wanted me to go out and party all night long. I agreed to meet them for dinner. So I was going and I was staying out later than I really wanted to, and they were accepting that I wasn't going to party all night long. Encouraging people to think about their relationships. Think of 2 times in the past that they've compromised to the extent that they felt like they got nothing out of it. So in the going out on partying all night, excessive compromise would be saying, okay, fine, I'll go out with you and party all night long, even though I don't want to. So I don't feel like I got anything out of that because it didn't meet any of my needs because I'm exhausted. I wanted to go home. What could I have done differently? And think of times that you've compromised and felt good about it. You felt like, okay, I didn't get exactly what I wanted, but I got some of what I wanted. Heck, at work, employment negotiations are almost always about compromise. If you're in a relationship with someone with a different temperament, how can you compromise to improve your relationship? For example, extroverts tend to be outgoing. They thrive on being around others. They need socialization. They love small talk in general. Introverts are the opposite. They tend to be more private, self-focused, overwhelmed by large crowds, and a lot of introverts detest small talk. They're like, let's talk about something deep and meaningful or just be quiet. How can you compromise? What can you do in terms of those relationships? And for extroverts, my husband is an introvert. I'm an extrovert. When we go out, I keep the crowd to, maybe another couple or 2 couples. Anything more than that starts to get overwhelming. So I'm getting my socialization needs met and he's not feeling overwhelmed. The other aspect of temperament that a lot of people compromise on is judging, the structured planner, versus perceiving, or the spontaneous person. And I am very much the structured planner. I like to plan everything down to the half hour. My husband, not so much. He feels hemmed in if we're doing the same thing day after day after day, and he can't just get a wild hair. When the kids were young, we agreed to plan on a spontaneous day for whatever that means. Saturdays, we could do whatever he wanted. I wasn't going to plan anything, so I was going to be flexible on Saturdays, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it worked. What can you do? In what way can you compromise so one person doesn't feel overwhelmed or completely stifled? Encouragement. We all need a cheering section, especially when we're doing something difficult or getting outside of our comfort zone. Honest feedback and encouragement helps people recognize their ability to achieve their goals. I'm not going to tell somebody, hey, go for it, if I think there is no chance in whatever that this person is going to succeed. I may say, I think that's going to be a really hard lift. I'm here to support you if that's what you really want to do, but I'm not going to say, go for it, you've got this, because that would be inauthentic. I would providing honest feedback and encouragement says, I think that's going to be a really difficult thing to do. However, if that's something you want to do, I'm here to support you. When you're thinking about or preparing to do something difficult, how do you want people to encourage you? Do you want them to constantly be asking you about it or not? Do you want them to provide advice or not? How is it that they can be supportive and encouraging? We need to communicate that to other people. How do you feel when others encourage you? And how can you encourage yourself? What can you do to be your own best cheering section and, quite honestly, silence that inner critic? Forgiveness is the F word. Forgiveness in this case is a power move. Forgiveness means I'm going to accept what happened because guess what? I can't change the past no matter how much I want to. And I'm going to choose to use my energy to learn from it and protect myself in the future instead of stewing on done me wrongs. I am going to forgive them for doing what they did. And I'm going to say, okay, in some situations, that may mean we're not going to have contact anymore. In other situations, it may mean, okay, I've got to adjust my approach. My stepfather used to be habitually late. And I mean, not 15 minutes, like an hour and a half late. And it drove my mother crazy. She would feel disrespected, rejected. She'd get herself all wound up. And ultimately, getting angry with him about it wasn't doing anything to change it. Ultimately, she figured out that instead of being angry about it and threatening and telling him, you better show up on time this time, which didn't work, she started telling him to show up an hour and a half earlier than she really wanted him to. And guess what? He started showing up on time. So she forgave him for being time inattentive, we will say, and chose to focus on how can I use that energy to figure out how to better solve this problem. Forgiveness of people who have wronged us in some way, again, doesn't mean saying, it's okay. If I had somebody in my family who was struggling with addiction, and in their addiction, they did a bunch of things that were wrong, I could stay angry about it, but it wouldn't do me any good because I couldn't change the past. It would just be draining my energy, constantly revving my battery. Or I could choose to look back at those situations and say, okay, what are the signs that this person is using again? How can I use this experience to learn from it and use that knowledge to protect myself from what may happen if they relapse? So questions, when we talk about forgiveness, a lot of people really hold on to those resentments and that guilt. How does holding on to resentments and guilt impact your ability to trust others and yourself? How do people you hold resentments toward, or do people you hold resentments toward really even care? And that's a big gotcha for a lot of us, because we may be angry at somebody for something they did, and we're using a bunch of our energy and revving our batteries, and they're just clueless. They are blissfully ignorant, or maybe just blissful. They don't care. So do the people you hold resentments toward really care? Think of a guilt or a grudge you currently hold. What are you afraid will happen if you choose to use your energy to learn from the experience to remove the threat instead of staying angry about it, whether it's staying angry with yourself through guilt or staying resentful at someone else? Intimacy means closeness and lowering your boundaries. We have intimacy in all pieces of our life. Physical intimacy is what people usually think of. Touch, literal personal space, eye contact, etc. When you feel more intimate with somebody, you tend to allow them more eye contact, less personal space, more touch, etc. Interpersonal intimacy refers to the type and pace of relationships and even sharing friends. When we first meet somebody, we may not be willing or wanting to introduce them to our entire friend group right away until we learn a little bit more about them. Or we may. I mean, that's up to you. But emotional and cognitive intimacy kind of goes back to boundaries. When we lower our boundaries, we become more intimate. So emotional and cognitive intimacy means sharing more openly my feelings, thoughts, needs, perceptions with someone in my life. And environmental intimacy is my stuff and my environment. Am I going to let somebody know where I live? Am I going to let them look at my stuff? And etc. So you can see how intimacy varies. And you will have different levels of each type of intimacy with every person. Some people, you may have a whole lot of environmental intimacy. You're totally willing to let them see where you live and they come over all the time, but maybe you don't really share your actual thoughts and feelings with them that much. That's okay, but being aware and if you want to increase the depth of your relationship, what would it take to increase those other types of intimacy? Questions for people. Which types of intimacy do they feel most comfortable with? Which types of intimacy are hardest and why? And think of 3 important people and how they might increase their level of intimacy with those people in each piece of life. So creating a plan. These 3 people, my spouse, my child, and my neighbor. I don't know. How could I increase intimacy with each of those people? Responsibility can be a double-edged sword, like a lot of the things we talked about today. It's important for people to take responsibility for the aspects that they are responsible for and stop the blame game. You didn't do this all by yourself. What was my part in it? But it's also important for people to be able to set that boundary and not take responsibility for aspects of the situation that are out of their control. Stop the guilt. And again, thinking about how did people learn to be overly responsible or irresponsible in their prior relationships? How did that help them survive? Questions. Think of a time you failed to take responsibility for something that was your fault. How did that impact your relationship with yourself and others? And again, you're not necessarily taking responsibility for the whole thing. You may be taking responsibility for one little aspect of it. But if you didn't take responsibility for your part, how did that impact your relationship with yourself? Did you feel guilty about it? Did you feel bad about it? And how did it impact your relationship with that other person? Think of a time you took responsibility for everything. How did that impact you? And this is where we start moving into codependency. I'm going to be overly responsible. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to be responsible for what you do. Oh, that's exhausting. What did your family and peers teach you about taking responsibility for your part instead of blaming? And how does what you learned about other people's willingness to take responsibility and other people's expectations of you taking responsibility, how does that impact your ability to trust others or be trusted? Healthy responsiveness. To be healthfully responsive, you must also be aware and compassionate. If I'm oblivious to what's going on, or I don't care about what's going on, then I'm probably not going to respond. Responsiveness is the action taken in response to the feelings and needs of yourself and others. Responsiveness can celebrate successes and provide support during times of distress. And we want to remember both sides. So the questions. When you were a child, Who responded appropriately when you had a need? Who responded appropriately when you felt overwhelmed? And here's the big one, when you had a success. In many families, especially dysfunctional ones, the response only happened when there was a problem. If everything was going fine, the child often felt ignored or overlooked. So when did people respond appropriately? How did their responses help you feel safe and loved and connected? And when people failed to respond, how did it make you feel? A follow-on question would be, what could you do to be more responsive to yourself and more responsive to 3 people that are important in your life? You don't want to say everybody in your life because that gets overwhelming. Have them identify 1 to 3 people that they want to improve their relationship with. And unconditional positive regard. To feel safe, people need to know that they are loved for who they are, even if others dislike their behaviors or disagree with their thoughts or feelings. It's, I love you, period. Conditional regard means I love you when, or I love you if. Unconditional positive regard. If somebody breaks your favorite vase, instead of saying, you're a bad person, I hate you because you broke my vase, I love you even though you were being careless. I love you, I dislike the behavior that you broke the rules of playing ball in the house. Conditional regard would mean I only love you when you're doing right. I only love you when you're following directions. So the questions: in what ways do you reject yourself as a result of your behaviors or mistakes? Oh, this is a big one for a lot of people. They criticize themselves. They think of themselves as less than worthy of love because of mistakes, past mistakes, or when they make a mistake in the present, they say, oh, you're so stupid, you're so worthless, you're so this. That's not unconditional regard. You are lovable. You are worthy. That behavior, okay, the behavior could use some help. And that separating that, even though it seems like semantics, is really important. What people, or even pets, do you love even when they make bad choices? Thinking of children, thinking of pets, it's easier to conceptualize this than when you start thinking about adults and yourself who you say, well, they should have known better. Well, let's just take that shoulda out of there. Maybe they shoulda, maybe they shouldn't. It doesn't matter. When they make bad choices, when they make mistakes, do you still love them? It doesn't mean you're still going to have low boundaries and be super intimate with them. It means that you love them. Part of loving and protecting yourself may mean increasing boundaries, reducing intimacy until you feel safe again. But recognizing that you still love that person, or that person is still worthy of love, even though they're making bad choices. And how can you set and maintain boundaries with someone and still show unconditional positive regard? Back in the day, they may still call it tough love. Whatever. When you've got somebody in your family who has a mental health or substance abuse issue, and they are not doing what they need to do to take care of themselves. They're not taking their medication, they're using, they're stealing, whatever. Setting and maintaining boundaries with somebody and saying, you know what, I'm not going to let you steal from me. I'm not going to let you use me. That doesn't mean I don't love you. It means I don't like those behaviors and I'm not going to support those behaviors. But as soon as you start doing what you need to do to take care of you, I am supportive of that. And if you want to do it right now, I will help you. I will help you get to detox. I will help you find a lawyer. I'll help you do whatever you need to do. But I'm not going to support the dysfunctional behaviors. Relationships take work, including our relationship with ourselves. No two people have the same thoughts, experiences, or needs, which means no two people have the same perceptions or reactions. Healthy relationship skills create a sense of safety and trust within yourself. I know that I can trust myself to keep myself safe, and a sense of safety and trust with others that fosters connection and belonging. We don't become more intimate. We don't lower our boundaries until other people have demonstrated that they're trustworthy, until other people have demonstrated that they're safe. And even then, we don't go from all to nothing. It's a gradual reduction. We kind of test the waters and see, is this person trustworthy? The skills discussed today can help you nurture healthy, secure relationships and become more consistent, attentive, responsive, encouraging, and safe in your relationships.